And show captions. Okay, great. And find my notes. Okay. Can never tell how long it takes for people to kind of come in from the waiting room. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm Judith Rosenbaum of the Jewish Women's Archive. I am so thrilled to be here with you tonight for a conversation with our amazing young leaders on Gen Z Jewish feminism. Please say hello in the chat box. Make sure to chat to everyone. We love to know who is with us in the room tonight. And also the chat box is where you can add your questions, and we will try to weave them in later on in the Q&A portion of the program. If you would like captioning, you can click the CC button on the bottom of your screen where it says show captions, and that will turn them on for you. A few words about JWA for anybody who's new to us. We are a digital archive that expands and transforms the way that we understand history and Jewish culture by documenting and sharing Jewish women's stories. And we also pay special attention to how gender functions in the past and present. We do all of this work because we believe that uncovering a more diverse and nuanced story helps create a better world. And we are grateful for your partnership in that effort. We all need to be chipping in together. Our virtual programs are just one aspect of JWA's work. I hope you will check out jwa.org to explore the full range of projects and resources that we offer. Tonight, you're also going to be hearing about another one of our programs, the Rising Voices Fellowship, which is for teens in grades 10 to 12. We are celebrating 10 years of Rising Voices as a national program. And I actually want to begin tonight by sharing a few words about how this program came to be 10 years ago. Rising Voices was founded as a partnership initially between JWA and Prosdor of Hebrew College. It was envisioned by JWA staff member Jordan Rosensky and Amelia Diamond of Prosdor. The pilot year was a regional program with just 6 fellows, and it was designed to bring younger voices onto JWA's blog and to advance conversations about Judaism and feminism through writing. Now, you probably are aware that there is no shortage of leadership programs for young people, but Rising Voices offered a broader, different kind of approach to leadership. Leadership as not just running a club or an organization, it's not just being able to stand up in front of the room and be the person in charge, but rather that leadership is about also having the skills, the confidence, and the vulnerability to open and guide conversations and to shift the way that people think about an issue. And we designed Rising Voices to cultivate this kind of leadership, which we call thought leadership, in teens through a combination of in-person retreats, monthly webinars, writing essays for publication by JWA, and a curriculum that focuses on Jewish history, feminism, and writing as a tool for social change. And along the way, one of the beautiful things that happens is that our fellows create a supportive and pluralistic community together, which often lasts way beyond the program, where we love seeing that. From that first moment of that pilot year, it was very clear that this was not just a blogging fellowship, and this was going to have to be more than a regional program because people from all over the country were interested. And it became a national program the following year and grew first to 8 fellows and then 12 per year and then to 18 fellows per year, which is what we have today. We were really blown away by the insights and deep questions and powerful voices of our fellows, and it was clear that they were ready to be leaders. And actually, Rising Voices demonstrated to us something that we knew implicitly, which is that leadership is not something that's like out there for later, that the young people we were working with were actually obviously already leaders in their communities, and they were already functioning as teachers for many people, including us. We wanted, of course, to make sure that they also had access to the enormous resources of Jewish history and women's history. And we wanted them to know that they are part of those stories, to feel that they're carrying on that legacy. And we also really wanted to be able to see that history anew through their eyes. And over the past 10 years, we have, and it's been incredibly powerful, shaping our work. Rising Voices has made JWA's work truly multi-generational. And as the alumni network grows, we're now at about 150 graduates of the fellowship. We really continue to learn from them and to see all of them take leadership in JWA, including on our staff and board and in the larger world. And it's just wonderful and gratifying and hopeful. And since we all need more hope these days, we wanted to share that hope with you and celebrate this new generation of Jewish feminist leaders and hear what they have to say. So I'm now going to turn it over to the alums themselves and shut up and get off the screen. I am delighted to introduce our moderator for this evening. Minna Stein was a Rising Voices Fellow in 2017-2018 and is a recent graduate of Florida State University, where she studied communications, digital media, and film. She is a passionate writer and activist working to educate students on power-based personal violence. Minna co-hosts and produces a film podcast called The Movies That Made Her, But Not Me, on how generational perspectives influence how we interpret and enjoy movies. And she just released her first documentary film short called If Not Faust, Where? Welcome, Minna. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here, and I'm so excited to talk about the program and what we've all learned from the program, what we've been up to since. So how about first introduce ourselves, say a little bit about ourselves and what we've been up to since Rising Voices. Just a quick introduction.
I'm happy to start off. My name is Dahlia. I was a Rising Voices Fellow in the 2019-2020 year. So we were affected by COVID, but had the opportunity for an in-person retreat in Boston in 2019 that I think really set the tone for our year. I was a junior in high school at the time, definitely grappling with questions of Judaism and feminism and what an observant Jewish feminist life would look like for me. And the fellowship really framed that dialectic and gave me so much clarity about not just the type of life I want to lead, but the type of people I want in it. In many ways, the people who I've met through that fellowship and other alums of the fellowship remain my best friends to this day. Since then, I am in college now. I'm a junior at Barnard and the Jewish Theological Seminary in the joint program. I'm studying political science and English and Jewish text. So I wrote a blog post. I think my first blog post was about my interest in learning Talmud, and now I get to do that on a weekly basis at JTS, which is very special. And outside of the fellowship, I've had the opportunity to enter the professional sphere, and I spent this past year working at the office of the New York State Attorney General as an intern in the Civil Rights Bureau. So it's been really special to take kind of the model of activism I learned in Rising Voices and bring that to a more universalist setting, while feeling that my Jewish identity really guides me in that work still.
I can go now. My name is Naomi Bethune. I use she, her pronouns, and I was a member of the RV19 cohort. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, so it was really lovely being able to participate in events that were in Brookline and Newton. Since RVF, I was in, I think, my sophomore year of high school. I'm a junior now in college. I go to UMass Boston, where I am a philosophy major. Outside of school, I'm quite busy this semester, but I have been working in aquatics for 5 years now, mostly as a swim instructor, so I do that. This semester, I have a really cool editorial internship with the Boston Review, which is a literary magazine based out of Cambridge. And I recently, as of last semester, started writing articles from my school's independent student newspaper called the Mass Media. But besides that, I have been spending a lot of time getting more involved in like academic philosophy, getting my papers published and upcoming conferences I'll be presenting at. So yeah, I mean, I definitely got a lot of like a start on like the writing I'm doing now, while I was doing Rising Voices. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I guess I can go because I'm the only one left. My name is Irene. I'm originally from Fayetteville, Arkansas, but I currently go to Yale. I'm a first year at Yale in New Haven, and I did RVF last year. I was a senior in high school, so the 2022-2023 cohort.
Currently, I'm majoring in economics and history, and I'm pretty involved in my school's Hillel, and I was also on the steering committee for a wonderful Jewish Women's Conference that happened last weekend, where I moderated a panel with Dr. Judith Rosenbaum, which I think is kind of funny because now I'm on a Jewish Women's Archive panel. Outside of school, mostly I'm still trying to adjust to college, but I'm really excited to continue being involved in Hillel and be involved in sort of like Jewish activism, which I would say like I really got my start here on the Rising Voices Fellowship. So I'm really grateful for that.
That's awesome. Well, it's so great to hear from you guys about what you all have been up to. And I think that it's so clear that we all have taken so much that we learned from RVF with us into what we're doing now. And that there was this spark for writing and activism that was then furthered through the Rising Voices Fellowship. And we grew that passion, we blossomed. So I'm wondering, like, what was one highlight from the RVF program / experience for you guys? Does anyone want to share a highlight?
The thing that stands out for me most was actually our second webinar over our second retreat over Zoom. And it was not the forum that any of us had hoped for. I remember so clearly the continued email updates of whether we'd be able to meet in person or not. And ultimately, it was decided that we'd be meeting on Zoom. But two really meaningful things happened to me during that conference. I think the first was that I got to have a prom with we had a virtual prom with the people who really felt like some of my closest friends at the time. And it felt really special to have this momentous high school occasion with my fellow fellows. And I cherish that a lot. But more significantly, at that conference, we had a session about LGBTQ inclusion in Jewish spaces. And it was in the Zoom chat that we all began to share our reflections on the ways in which Jewish youth spaces, and specifically Jewish youth groups, had challenged our conceptions of what a Jewish community that is truly committed to LGBTQ plus equality looks like. And we shared our frustration that Jewish youth group spaces felt quite regressed in comparison to the norms that we upholded and aspired to in the rest of our lives. And so a group of us from in that chat continued on with publishing an article sort of calling in the Jewish community to really address the need for better response to misogyny and harassment in Jewish youth groups. And 6 of us continued working together the following year to get Jewish Teens for Empowered Consent off the ground. And although the initiative does not kind of stand in the form that it was today, I was actually just texting with Lila Goldstein, who is wrapping up her senior year at Brandeis, and she wrote her Jewish Studies, Women's Studies thesis there about the issue of Jewish sexual harassment in youth spaces. And our work with JTech was something that I think she thought about a lot in the process of writing that thesis. And so I'm reminded of all the ways in which that Zoom retreat ended up being so informative for my life, and I think for a lot of other people's lives.
I think that's a really good example. And oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut somebody off. Apologies.
you're totally
Go
fine.
ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna share my fondest memory from RVF. So mine is definitely from the first retreat where I very much had a lot of like anxiety coming in. So I grew up pretty secular in a pretty non-Jewish area, and I think coming into RVF I was like very worried that I wasn't going to be Jewish enough, or that like I didn't have the kind of background that would make me feel at home in a Jewish space. But on the first retreat, Havdalah was one of the most beautiful memories that I have. Havdalah is one of my favorite rituals now. And you know, when we have them on campus, which is not all the time, I always go because it's one of my favorite things. But I remember like we stood in a circle and we sort of like we all said what we were grateful for. And I think like the primary thing that really everybody thought of was the people and sort of like being in community. And I think that like as somebody who had never like been in a Jewish community, and especially like in a Jewish feminist community, and sort of like that understanding of like the fact that Jewish womanhood can be complicated, but it's also so beautiful and so rewarding. I think for me, it was really special to like have other people sort of express the same thoughts and ideas as I did. And I think sort of one of the things it did was it really empowered me that like I could seek out Jewish community and I could be in Jewish spaces. And so now I think like in college, like I've definitely taken that lesson of like real friendship and real bonds that we made during that first retreat, even like in a few short days with me. And I still love Havdalah. Like I just love the melody.
I'd say my favorite memory was our final retreat, which we were really fortunate to have take place in person at Hebrew College in Newton. And it's just like a really lovely, I think it was 2 days. And at that point, we were all pretty um, as close as you can be from all the Zooms and all the other times we had seen each other and communicated with each other. So it felt extra special. We did so many different activities, including a Shabbat service, which I just thought was really great. I grew up Reconstructionist and it was more reform, but I didn't really feel out of place when we were doing it. I felt very comfortable and like I was learning a lot more about Judaism, which is something I really did take away from the fellowship. Learning more about all these different ways you can participate in the religion. So it was really cool. It was just a wonderful couple of days, and it was very bittersweet because we were all saying bye to each other, and everyone had come from all around the country, and it was just extremely special. And I just felt so grateful that I was able to have the time in person to spend um, or to share these super special, important moments because I still hold them with me. Um, and I still have a lot of care and love for my cohort members. Even though like we're not all in touch, we all definitely have each other's backs, and I really appreciate that.
That's so nice. It was funny that you mentioned Havdalah because that was going to be my example as well. That was probably one of the first Havdalahs I'd ever done was through Rising Voices, and I felt really embarrassed because I didn't know it and everybody else did. But I think that that's something that's so amazing about the program is that it does feel so welcoming and it does feel so inclusive and it is so open to people who have different Jewish backgrounds and different levels of Jewish learning and understanding. And it makes every piece of every service or tradition like something that everybody can find meaning in. And so that's what I found to be so beautiful and so important about the experience for me. But I know our first highlight talked a lot about identity and Jewish identity, and that's something that's a big part of the Rising Voices experience is diving deeper into Jewish identity and feminist identity and just identity in general and who we are and how we fit into the world. And so I'm wondering, how does your Jewish feminism intersect with other aspects of your identity?
I was really lucky to grow up in an incredibly diverse synagogue. Honestly, not every Jew of color is like able to say that, so I was very, very fortunate. And I was from a young age interested and then slash like involved in feminist or just social justice initiatives. So the two always kind of worked together. Um, Judaism is a very beautiful religion that has so much emphasis on the empowerment of women and the way in which we can change the world. And I've always felt very connected to that. And especially as a Black woman who has struggled with her identity, not just in like the world in general, but also in Jewish spaces, I've always been able to keep that in mind. That I am a Jewish woman as well. Those two parts of my identity can work together. They do work together. I am proof that Black Jews exist and that being a Black woman is a marginalized identity. But I know and it is based in the religion and the practices and the values that I grew up in, that I need to call and work towards the liberation of all women. And it's kind of beautiful how I was able to get there, even though it took a while, understanding that these different parts of who I am can actually really inform each other. And that's what's made me into the woman I am today, and also the writer I am today, and it makes me feel comfortable talking about this stuff, writing about it. And I've gathered this sense of pride in Black Jewish womanhood. And I find it extremely important to talk about it because Jews of color are becoming more and more and more a part of the American Jewish population. And we are just as much a part of the community as everyone else. And it's super important that if we are able and comfortable to communicate our experiences and use them as a good base for any social justice activism that we're trying to participate in.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. So thank you. I think that when I understand my Jewish feminism in relationship to my identity, I would say two things really come forward to me. The first is that I am part Asian, and the second is that I'm from the South. And I think like both of those identities can be difficult to hold when you are in a space, in a Jewish space, because both of those identities are not particularly common or not particularly like normalized when you're in a Jewish space. But I think that my sort of like Jewish feminism has really like both made me really want to call out like problems when I see them. I think like when you engage with talking about like issues around race with a lot of with people, that can be hard, but I think like one of the things that I really found is like there's this long legacy of empowerment that's stemmed from Jewish feminists that I really draw a lot of strength from, that I think about all the time. And I think like the other thing is like I think when, especially when you're at a place like Yale, when you're in the Northeast and you're from the South, like that can also be kind of hard. But I think that like one beautiful thing that I really take with me is like an opportunity to like not give up on places and not give up on people, even if like what they're going through, what it seems like what's happening is difficult to understand. And I think like Jewish women have fought for so long, for so much and for so many rights, and like it's just like made me much more aware of like the fact that like, you know, nothing is hopeless and nothing is a lost cause. And I would say like those are two major ways that my Jewish feminism interacts with my other identities.
Those are beautiful reflections and very hard to follow. But the one thing that's coming to mind is I think I grew up in a space where my identities were not immediately, I wasn't immediately called to question them. I have gone to Jewish day school all of my life, and I always felt quite identified in Jewish settings. But I have a really distinct memory of being a 7th or 8th grader at my middle school, and Amy Eilberg, who was the first rabbi ordained by the first female rabbi ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary, coming to speak to us and realizing that women hadn't always been rabbis in Jewish spaces, and this paradigm of the female rabbi that I took for granted was actually quite remarkable. And so I left that talk really feeling, I think, I didn't have such clarified ideas of what it meant to be a Jewish feminist, but I felt that my Jewish womanhood really mattered. So that was kind of the first time that I was called to confront it. And now I obviously have had a lot more time to wrestle with what it means to be a Jewish feminist. And I am in a lot of actively Jewish spaces by choice. And similar to what Irene said about moving to a different part of the country, specifically moving to the Northeast from California, I saw a very different depictions of Jewish womanhood than I had been exposed to before. I have many more friends now who are Orthodox or modern Orthodox. And so to them, Jewish feminism looks quite different from how it looks to me. And when I first came to school in New York, I often felt really frustrated by the kind of gender issues that I had taken for granted growing up in California. And I've both learned when it makes sense to speak out and when it is time for me to reflect on my own tolerance and where there might be kind of gaps in worldviews and in the situations where that's okay. And in terms of sort of more secular settings where my Jewish feminism informs me, my internship in the Civil Rights Bureau this year has been, Irene, I see you in the dark. That internship has really made me consider what it means to be a Jewish feminist who's an activist for other groups suffering from marginalization, both other kinds of minorities on any front, and also for Jews who are not necessarily the Jews who I most readily associate with, but are facing discrimination nonetheless. The Attorney General deals with a lot of challenges that Satmar Hasidim in New York face, and those are Jewish communities where I recognize that as a woman, I wouldn't necessarily be held in equal standing in those spaces, but I still feel a strong conviction on their behalf, a sense of identification with their experience because I also am a Jew. And so to me, it is Jewish feminist work to act in service of the rights of all Jews, even Jews who disagree with me on fundamental issues.
Those are three really beautiful and powerful answers to that question about Jewish feminism and how it's not only part of your identity, but how it upholds other parts of your identity and works in tandem with other parts of your identity. I'm wondering what you guys hope for yourself as Jewish feminist leaders when you look towards the future. I think you've done such an amazing job establishing yourself as Jewish feminists, but what do you see for yourselves going forward? And what do you see for Jewish feminist leadership in general going forward?
Right now, I currently am considering getting my PhD in philosophy, so that will take some time. But I've always thought that something about Jewishness would be involved in what I'm researching and studying. It is now, and I don't ever want that to go away. And I think that as time goes on and as I become more informed about the history of Jewish feminism, because I hate to admit it, but I don't think I know as much as I should. I think there's always more to learn. I would love to use that to inform my studies, especially when we're talking about the intersections of race, gender, and the Jewish feminist act, who have done incredible work, but the face of the American Jewish community is changing. And our future leadership has to reflect that because we need representation. And it's my hope that like Black and brown Jewish kids have that representation now. I think that it's happening. I think there's some incredible rabbis and other spiritual leaders who are people of color, and who are Jewish. And I think that there's nothing inherently off of Jewish feminism. The beauty about Judaism as a religion is that it's very flexible and progressive and expansive. And there's no reason why or no set way of thinking about who can be a Jewish feminist and who can lead these changes. And I think that it's incredibly important to keep that in mind moving forward, that Judaism above all calls for change. And as a Reconstructionist Jew, I wholeheartedly believe that. If Judaism in a religious sense can be developed and worked to fit our modern world, then Jewish feminist leadership should as well. And I wholeheartedly stand by that.
I think that like when I like sort of like look at that question, I think sort of like about what's happening with me and like in my communities now, and also sort of like what I want to see more broadly in the future. I think at Yale I sort of like am involved in my campus Hillel, and while being there I've like recognized that in many ways like it was very much a privilege to be able to in many ways find my Jewish identity in a space with a lot of women because you know I think it can be difficult when there are people that you disagree with or customs that you might find problematic or like difficult to wrestle with and understand in a space that you also find to be your home. So I think like one of the major things that I want to do here on campus is really like push for that like understanding and recognition and acknowledgement and really provide a space for Jewish women to be and to like be powerful. I think in the future, like I don't really know what I want to do, but like I know that like whatever I want to do, like I'll have my Jewish feminist values with me, and I really just like want that to serve as an example and like as like something that like guides and defines like what I do, no matter what it is. I think that there are so many like wonderful things that you can do with those values. Also, sorry about my lights. My dorm has automatic lights, so if you shut off again, that's why.
I have similar things to say. Like Irene, I really feel like I came of age as a Jewish feminist in settings that were so distinctly Jewish and feminist. I was spending time today with my Rama counselor from when I was 11, who now lives in New York City and works really close to school. So I am reminded of all the ways in which I had these role models and was sort of given given identity tools to really grapple with and kind of flesh out who I wanted to become. I think that representation of Jewish women in the rabbinate at varying level and kind of across the denominational spectrum is important. A lot of my kind of Jewish feminist identity was formed, as I said, by seeing women rabbis. I think the year I was doing the Rising Voices Fellowship, I felt really adamant that I was going to become a rabbi. And I no longer necessarily feel that way, but it is, women really need to conceive of themselves as leaders in religious spaces. And I hope for more spaces like Rising Voices and sort of expanding the availability of programs like this, the availability of camp. Jewish spaces are incredibly expensive and prohibitive on class in terms of class in a lot of ways. And I think that we make excellent strides towards class equity, but that is an area where there is really a lot of room for improvement. And I'm taking a political science class right now that has forced me to sort of confront my class blind spots. I think in a lot of the spaces that I occupied growing up, we thought of diversity in really specific ways. And those ways are absolutely important. And yet one piece of diversity that we always overlooked was class diversity, because a certain social class was often taken for granted, or the sort of class diversity in our midst was uninterrogated because we were uncomfortable with it. And so I'm thinking of the ways in which we can make experiences. Rising Voices is so special because it's subsidized, and there are a lot of programs that are absolutely wonderful and thus far not subsidized to that extent.
Want to hear you guys talk about the different leadership roles that you guys are taking on now or pursuing now or pursuing in the near future. I'm wondering what lessons you learned in Rising Voices that you will take with you. Like, how do you implement things that you learned in RVF today? Like, what things are you writing about? What lessons do you hold near and dear when you move on to the next things?
I think, oh, sorry, Irene, go ahead.
No, you're good. You can.
Um, I think the importance of community is something that I will really be carrying forward. Um, I said it at the beginning, but my Rising Voices friends remain some of my best friends, and really the friendships are so rich because of the ways in which they challenge me. And so to constantly be in community with people who force me to confront challenging topics and they really guide me sort of in my conception. And I always feel kind of like I have this robust Jewish feminist network around me. But I think of the sense of security and warmth that gives me in my life. And I know that in whatever I do going forward, I want that community to be really central. And I think I also want to be in spaces that are not always comfortable and do sort of kind of put me on edge because I think that experience is valuable. But really, I also know that having a kind of strong Jewish feminist community will guide me.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about like leadership roles that I've had was definitely being on the steering committee for the Jewish Women's Conference that happened over the weekend. That was like really one of like the times that I in my life I've walked away and just felt like really like deeply inspired. Like there were so many really amazing people that we got to talk with and learn from. But like I'm also involved in like leadership at my Hillel, and I do some things with the community kitchen at Yale, which I also like think are really important in sort of like what I currently do for leadership. And I think in like all of those, there's this like really like deep commitment to social justice and to lifting up the voices of people that maybe aren't always heard. And I think like that very much I took from like not just RVF, but in part from RVF. And I think that's really special and powerful.
Currently, I can't think of any like specific leadership roles that I hold, but I will say that the great thing about being a JWA member in 2018, 2019 was that it was such an amazing time where it gave me a lot of room for self-growth and so many tools for not just improving my writing, but my confidence overall in my like original thoughts and ideas. Because the JWA staff that I worked with were just so supportive and amazing, and you really can't beat that anywhere. And a lovely thing about it is that you're able to take some of these skills that you've learned JWA and kind of universally apply them to any area of your life, to be quite honest with you. Um, I have always felt, relatively confident in myself and the thing, but you need resources, you need practice, and you need support in order to actually execute those feelings of luckily sorry, I just froze. Luckily, my experience being sorry, it's freezing again. Okay. In JWA was very helpful towards my feelings of belonging in spaces. It's really hard to want to step or feel like you're able to step into a leadership role when you already have this kind of baseline feeling of that you're not being accepted there. And I I will never be able to say that I'm, as a Black Jew, going to be accepted in every Jewish space. But the lovely thing about Rising Voices is that I was, um, and no one batted an eye at me, and I didn't receive any unique or special treatment because of my identity. And I felt comfortable and safe. And when you feel that way, your confidence in your ability to lead and to like exude strength is just increased so much. Um, and it was honestly one of the first concretely positive experiences I've had in a Jewish space. And you take that chance and that opportunity to build yourself and feel comfortable, and you can kind of bring it with you anywhere. So you feel proud of yourself and confident and like well equipped to take on anything that's being thrown at you. So that's something that I really, really, really appreciated.
That's awesome. Thank you guys all so much for sharing. And in our last few minutes before we throw to Q&A from the audience, I want to ask one final fun question, which is what Jewish feminist books that you guys might be reading or have read that you would want to recommend. I'm going to recommend Milk Fed. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but it's amazing about different sects of Judaism and how they interact with each other and how they interact with different feminist issues. It's just like a really, really incredible book. So if anyone else has a book that they'd like to recommend, I'm sure everyone as well as myself would love to hear what it is.
Lady Justice by, I think that's what it's called, by Dahlia, who is the Slate journalist following the Supreme Court. It's not explicitly a Jewish feminist book, but it does go on a very hefty digression about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So I think that's important. That book has oh, yeah, Judith, she's wonderful. She was my mom's camp counselor. And I take a lot of pride in sharing her name. It was, I think, a great read if you're looking for something that is political with tones of Jewish feminism woven throughout.
I read The Red Tent when I was a senior in high school, which is many of you may have read it. And I think like there are, I think like I would recommend it. I think a lot about purity and like laws of purity in my life in general, because I just like think it's such an interesting like theological question. And I think like I really enjoyed like the imagining of what that would mean. And I think we sort of grant, I think we take away agency from women and from even like from women in the Bible sometimes. And I think the Red Tent does a really beautiful job of giving that agency back.
I don't think I have any like specific names of books, but over the years I've read a lot of biographies, um, which I thought did a really good job exploring like different Jewish women's experiences, especially as women of color. Totally forgetting. There's goodness, I'd have to look it up and I'll put it in the chat later. But autobiographies are a great way of kind of getting a look into the way that other people with separate, like marginalized identities from their Jewishness kind of move through life. Obviously, it's very powerful to speak to people and really talk to them and communicate with them, but there's some beautiful writings out there on Jewish women who come from an intersectional background and how it has affected every part of their life, because it can be a very complicated experience. And I think we're really lucky to have many authors writing about it comfortably. And also, like, making a point of how it has influenced their Jewish feminism, or how their Jewish feminist experiences have bolstered their pride in marginalized aspects of their identity. So yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I will look it up. But I have read at least two really interesting books on that.
Thank you so much, Minna, for that excellent moderation, and thank you to everyone for your answers. And I just wanted to step back in for a Q&A to give Minna a chance to answer. My name is Sarah Biskowitz. I am the manager of the Rising Voices Fellowship, and I am an alum myself of the program from 2016-2017. And I'm so happy to have these alums here speaking with us. And I would love to ask you all, how can other generations support you as a Jewish feminist?
I can answer. So I think like really like the most important thing for Jewish feminism is to just understand that like we're really like we're all in this together, you know what I mean? Like many of the issues that we're working on are different, but also many of them are the same and the spirit is still the same. And so I just like think that like an acknowledgement of that solidarity, like I think that that one thing that rings very true to me is that like we as Jewish feminists wouldn't be here without older Jewish feminists, because at the end of the day like like in many ways, like what we're fighting for and what we're hoping for are the same things. And so I just think that sort of like that like intergenerational solidarity is something that I really appreciate and admire.
I agree with that. And I will add that I think one thing that's great is the power of collaboration, like even something like this that we're doing right now. We're all different ages, did RVF at different times, but we're all working towards the same goals. And that's something that's so beautiful about intersectional collaboration is that when you recognize that everybody's working towards the same goal, their approach is just as valid as your approach. And so they all need to be considered. And probably the best approach is a combination of everyone's different points of views and their perspectives. And so it's great to have an opportunity like this to get to hear from other people and discuss different topics with them and work with them and all get to work together towards creating the future that we want to see.
I think collective engagement across age lines is really meaningful to see as well. I mean, I think taking part in intergenerational activities, being open to having your story recorded for a story aperture, for example. I remember doing that with my grandma during RVF. But the other thing I wanted to sort of mention, I think staying involved in the Jewish community and really feeling a sense of ownership for those spaces as well is important. I think there's really an opportunity for intergenerational ownership. My grandma was part of a campaign at her synagogue to ensure its continued independence in the face of a merger, and she called me the other day telling me about they had a get out the vote campaign for their synagogue to make sure that people voted in favor of staying an independent entity, and it was in a lot of ways it was reminiscent of political get out the vote campaigns that I study in school. And it also reminded me of the importance of kind of intergenerational engagement. And in the same way that I feel like I have a sense of ownership in the spaces that I'm in because I'm part of the next generation, there's a lot of value in things that older generations have done as well and continue to do. And so feeling a sense of kind of echoing what people said, a sense of shared purpose. And like Minna said, although our modes of engagement may look different, there's a lot of legitimacy and validity to what others are doing.
I think it's really about wanting to try on both ends, from young Jewish feminists and older ones, and trying to meet in the middle, even though we have probably wildly different life experiences with being Jewish, being women. And I think that it's incredibly powerful to learn from each other. Like every single older Jewish woman that I have had conversation with, regardless of their identification as like a feminist or not, has given me so much impactful information and stories. And I think that, like someone said before, stories is kind of what will bind us together, and feeling comfortable with coming together and leveling with each other and telling these stories is something that's really powerful, and I think could be extremely impactful in terms of helping this new generation of Jewish feminists to move forward, because we should always look on the past and take that and use that now, because there's a lot more lessons that are being told, I feel, and it's important to actually uncover them. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Those were beautiful answers. I'm wondering if all of you can share who your Jewish feminist hero is.
Maybe Tikva Frymer-Kensky for providing biblical scholarship in an environment that at the time was not particularly hospitable to women's voices as commentaries. I enjoy reading her commentary a lot for school.
I think for me, two really come to mind. One is Dr. Judith Plaskow. I just like I just like think like I've been getting so into feminist theology in a way that is like really incredible. And the other is probably Rabbi Angela Bookdahl, partially because she's like a really incredible rabbi, and also because like I think like as an Asian American, like or you can sort of feel out of place in Jewish spaces, and I think that Rabbi Angela Bookdahl is like somebody who has just been such an inspiration to like me and like also like, you know, my mom. Um, and just like this understanding that like we can fit in and like we're part of the community.
I'm gonna say that my Jewish feminist hero is actually somebody that I did in a Rising Voices like interview with, Rabbi Jennifer Singer. She's a rabbi from the community that I grew up in, and I had such an amazing experience getting to sit down and talk with her about all sorts of things going on in our community. But one thing that she talked to me a lot about was about women getting bat mitzvahed and the work that she did in our community to bat mitzvah elderly women in different like assisted living communities around the area that we lived. And I think that, you know, she does a lot of work that's like one-on-one, like person to person, like making sure each individual feels empowered. And that's something that I really admire and look up to and try to take into my own life and make sure that the people that I'm interacting with or people that I'm helping feel empowered by the work that I'm doing. So yeah, she's definitely a hero of mine and has been since I was in high school. So she's amazing.
Say my Jewish feminist hero was my rabbi growing up, Rabbi Barbara Penzer. She is an incredible activist and one of the most knowledgeable and caring women I've ever met. And I was so lucky to grow up with a rabbi who was a woman, and a rabbi who was extremely involved in multiple causes. Um, I just remember like there were so many times where she was in the news or she spoke about her experience protesting or traveling to speak on different topics related to just human rights or any other kind of major events that were happening in this country and even around the world that were affecting people, especially people from marginalized groups. Um, when I was younger, the temple, we still are, we were very involved in the campaign to promote workers' rights. Actually, the workers who picked the tomatoes for Wendy's, who were being exploited, and that was a huge thing. And she was that's just one of those things I remember. I was like, this is something that many people probably wouldn't have on the radar, let alone want to um, be involved with organizing around. And she brought us all into that. And she's just been this massive support and this incredible inspiration. And I just feel like it having her as my rabbi, having her guide me through my bat mitzvah, having her be there through literally every single step in my Jewish life. My life as a Jewish woman, I guess. She's the only rabbi I've ever known. It has really, 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 really impacted my strength and my pride in being a Jewish feminist and seeing how we can do anything and our our ability to be brave and lead the way and care about social justice is totally informed by our religious Jewishness. And they don't have to be separate things. They can actually work together. And when they do, it's very, very, very incredible. So, yeah.
Thank you all. Those were beautiful tributes. I love that we're recognizing our Jewish feminist heroes, and I would like to say that you are all future Jewish feminist heroes to other people. And so I'd love to end by asking you what your advice would be for feminists who are passionate about feminism and Judaism, who are younger than you and kind of looking to find their way.
I would encourage them to see writing as a tool for change, which is one of the things that I've really taken out of the fellowship and continue to employ in my day-to-day. The first thing I think of when something really frustrates me is how I would put it into an op-ed, and that's in large part due to my experience in the Rising Voices Fellowship. So to really have a sense of ownership over your own, recognize your ownership over your own voice, and that there's a lot of value in what you have to say, and also a lot of forums that would love to give you a platform to share your thoughts.
I 100% agree with that. That was going to be my answer as well. So I will just add on to that by saying that my advice, in addition to getting into writing, would be to not be afraid to speak in different communities that are having these kinds of difficult conversations. And while you're speaking, also make sure to listen, and, you know, make sure that you do writing, make sure that you speak your truth and everything, but also make sure that you're listening to where others are coming from and keeping an eye out for blind spots that you might have.
Yeah, I would say, like, first of all, like, I think like you should trust your gut. Like if something seems like bad or like you sort of like doesn't sit right with you as a feminist, like that's like a thing that like you should trust. And you also shouldn't hesitate to like be honest about that. Um, and then the other thing that I would say is like talk to older feminists and read because their stories can be really inspirational and really wonderful.
I would just say try to use all the resources you have, and once you exhaust that, go look for more. Um, and just remember that a big part of Judaism is questioning and trying to figure things out and looking for new perspectives. And I really think that we should all draw on that. Keeping an open mind and challenging any preconceived notions or ideas is really what's going to fuel you. And as long as you keep doing that, there's really no limit as to where you can go.
Thank you all so much. That was beautiful advice, and I'm going to try to follow it myself. I think it's really applies to everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists for their wonderful answers, and Minna also for moderating. And thank you to everyone for coming. And I'm just going to share some information about what's next for you all before I conclude. So we also have another exciting event coming up on May 2nd, dedicated to Jewish women's poetry. So this is a virtual program on May 2nd, and I will put the link in the chat to register. And we have more book talks coming up in June, where you might find your next favorite Jewish feminist read. So that's very exciting. We'll keep you posted on those. And our current cohort of Rising Voices Fellows is continuing to publish their blog posts. So you can read about that on our blog, which we'll put the link in the chat to see our current posts. And I am conducting a series of interviews with one alum from each cohort through the end of this year. And so we have a special link to read all of those interviews, which are being published now. So thank you so much to everyone for speaking on this panel. It was amazing to hear everything you had to say. And everyone, I encourage you to continue to follow the Rising Voices Fellowship because we are in our 10th year and we're only getting started. So thank you to our alums. And it was fabulous to hear from you all. And thank you to everyone for coming.